In the retail space today, you cannot go to a conference, listen to a podcast, or even read something on LinkedIn without the mention of AI. But here's the question. Is your company ready for AI? Or are you AI ready? We're going to answer that question today. Today is a very special podcast episode edition dedicated to our sponsors who have focused in and made the investment on our study and our podcast and every aspect of Worthy Retail Global. So we are going to be talking to Nexlytix today. Their focus is on helping you answer that question. Are you AI ready? So, hey, get ready for this episode of Retail Leadership with Steve Worthy.
Welcome to Retail Leadership with Steve Worthy, where we go well beyond the corporate playbook to unpack major opportunities, hidden challenges, and critical issues that senior retail leaders face every day. So let's get started right now.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm excited to have this conversation with you today. Could for those who don't know you, could you introduce yourself and your company, and then we're going to get into the conversation about AI. I said it very quietly because I wanted to be some mystery around it. AI. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
It indeed is, right, and thanks for having me on your podcast, Steve. So, just a quick introduction about myself, right? I'm Abhijit. I am one of the co-founders at Nexlytix. Typically, it's an AI firm or an AI native firm for retail and CPG companies, and I'm a Columbia alum as well, and looking forward to build a great presence around AI, as you mentioned, right, in the retail and CPG space through this company called Nexlytix.
Excellent. So before we get into Nexlytix, let's talk a little bit about you, right? So Columbia grad, but before Nexlytix, what were you doing, and what space were you in?
Right. So, I mean, entrepreneurship is not new to me. So this is not my first stint as a founder, right, or as a co-founder. This has been my second stint. So, my first stint was back in 2015, from 2015 till 2021. So it was around 6 years, and that's when we did an exit in 2021, and I joined VMware in their office of the CTO, which was more of a, I would say, research oriented job role that I had. I did that for a couple of years, and then I decided probably it's time to jump back into entrepreneurship. And this time, actually, I thought maybe a bit of a formal training is needed. So that's how Columbia happened.
Yeah.
And after Columbia, then here we are.
This okay. This is so interesting because, right, I am actually doing, like, this vlog thing where I'm sort of documenting, the day in the life of being an entrepreneur myself. And honestly, I literally just had this conversation early this morning. I get up super early, and I tend to get emails, with job offers to kind of go back into the retail space. And I like, and I look at, I'm like, ooh, and then I literally thought to myself this morning. I said, you know what? I said I every day, if I was to take that opportunity or something like that, I would be miserable every single day that I would have to, like, go to work, right? But the fact of what we do as entrepreneurs, my gosh, I don't think anybody really gets it or understands it, right? So what made you want to go into this space? Like, what was something that the impetus, behind, like, okay, you know what, I could probably take my knowledge and do a 9 to 5, but this is what I want to do.
Well, I mean, let me first start about the fact that you get those job offers, and no one better than me can relate to that because I too get those. Right, the moment you post something on LinkedIn, right, and the algorithm works in a way wherein you start getting those notifications.
Yeah.
And it's like every day you get it at around 6 o'clock, say, for example, and you start thinking, okay, what am I doing here? I have this job offer here, giving like, say, 200, 300, 400, whatever. And what am I doing here, right? Is it worth it? Is it not? And I believe, and this is the same conversation I have with my co-founder as well, right? And he just says just one sentence: an entrepreneur is someone who does a root canal by
Mm.
will.
Oh my gosh. That's that's so powerful. Why did like this part of my face started like I started to feel the pain when you said that. Oh my god. That's so good. That is so good.
Right. That's a powerful, like a hard hitting statement, right? And if you hear something like that, it kind of gives you the motivation to even go and work more harder, because now you have to beat that pain.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's your it's that's 100% correct, right? We volunteer for this, but so when you did your first foray into into entrepreneurship, what was some of the driving thought processes, and what were some of the skills that you had that you felt sure about, but what were some of the things that you know what, I really don't know how to do X, Y, and Z, but guess what? I'm still going to take this leap.
Right. That's a good question, actually. It's coming to that, right? So I come from a family of entrepreneurs. So my
Mm,
dad
mm,
was an entrepreneur. Uh, a lot of my wife's family was also entrepreneurs. So it kind of gives you that extra push that is
yeah.
needed. Sometimes a lot of people don't get. And it is needed. I'll be very honest with you. It is needed after all, right? Because as an entrepreneur, you have to do a lot of sacrifices, at least in the initial few years of your company, until and unless your company gets that, or your startup gets that plank or the runway to take off. Times are tough, right? And you have to make those adjustments. And it's not just you who makes those adjustments, right? It's your family,
Mhm.
it's your partner, even your kids, for that matter, right? Make those
Yeah.
adjustments. So getting that, uh, I would say, uh, mental push from the family, and the family knowing that nothing, all will be not hanky dory. There will be initial pressures, there will be initial hurdles. I was just talking with my dad this morning, and I heard this, and I got the same, like, I shouldn't use the word lecture, but same talk from him, saying that, yeah, right. I mean, what do we expect? You've chosen this path, so you have to live with it.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Your dad sounds like my mom. Like, that's something my mom would say. You're right. That's exact something that sounds like something exactly that she would say if I called her and start talking about what I'm going through. She's like, "Dude, you made this bid, so you need to lie in it, right? You like you chose this profession, so what are you gonna do?" Right? That's interesting.
Exactly. If you had to think about it, probably would have thought before doing this. Now you can't.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, let's move and talk to talk about Nexlytics, right? Um, I'm interested to hear and not just myself, but I think everybody who's going to be listening to this and watching this, the origin story, right, of Nexlytics, and we're going to dive deep into the retail space and data stacks and all that stuff. But give us a little bit of the origin story.
Right. Again, right, when it comes to the origin story, probably I'll have to go back to 2008, 2009, when I
Mhm.
met my
Mm.
founder first time. Um, and we actually clicked, to be honest, right? At that time, I was just a fresher, just passed out of my undergrad. My co-founder was in a phase of starting his own startup at that point of time.
Mm.
And I joined him as a tech lead in his startup, and I was there until around 2014, 2015, and that's when I started my own startup. I moved out of that company, of that startup, and started my own. And just last year, when I was at Columbia, when I was doing my grad course, I kind of met my co-founder here in New York, and I kind of pitched him an idea. I wouldn't say I pitched him an idea. It
Yeah.
wasn't an idea. Uh,
Mm,
but
mm,
I uh, so we kind of got to talking, and I said that I'm probably trying to do something in the data analytics space, because both of our startups, right, my co-founder startup and my startup earlier, was into the product development space.
mhm, mhm.
It wasn't specifically pertaining to data or AI for that matter. And this time around, I was pretty sure that I did not want to get into product development.
Yeah.
And retail was a unanimous choice because, as I said, right, my family comes from entrepreneurship in the retail space. My co-founder still has a startup which he runs product development for retail and CPG
Nice.
for that matter. So retail came in pretty natural to us, and so that's how we started discussing this probably a year and a half back, and we decided and we decided probably this time we can do it as co-founders, which
Mm,
wasn't the case last time.
yeah.
And that's how it started with the data and retail, and then the more difficult part of trying to find the right message, trying to find
Mm,
the right page, I would say still we are not there, and I
mm,
believe no company is there, because it keeps on evolving, message keeps on evolving, as and when you talk with more people, as and when you do more work, as and when the industry is evolving, right, every day. I believe at this point of time, you don't know what is coming in next week, and that's how fast paced the industry has been when it comes to AI for that matter.
mhm,
So
mhm,
to keep on evolving the messaging or the ideation or the pitch that you're giving to your customers on a, I wouldn't say a daily, but at least a weekly basis.
mm, mm. So what's the so at its core, what's the problem that you are solving? Right? You and I have had we've had several conversations before, so I get it, and of course, being a long term person in retail, understand it. But I want you to explain to everybody, like at its core, what's the problem that Nexlytics is solving?
You're listening to Retail Leadership with Steve Worthy.
Right. I would say, at its core, at the more fundamental level, there are two problems that we're trying to solve. The first problem is what we were discussing about just now, right? Is storytelling.
Mm,
What does that mean, right? Um, so, what we have noticed is a lot of companies, retail companies in general, this problem is not specific to retail, but a lot of retail companies, right? There is a bit of a disconnect between what the business wants when it comes to data
mhm,
and what their data teams or what their IT teams are giving to them. In general, like being from IT, right? Spending my whole life in IT, I kind of get a sense that there is always a race to deliver more and more.
mhm,
But
mhm,
when it comes to data, it's quite the opposite actually. Um, you don't want an executive to have a 200-page report given to them, and saying that, okay, just read this through. That's not how it works. uh, and coming back to the aspect of what is the story behind the data, the
mhm,
exec, whoever is looking at the data, right, the numbers, need to know the story behind the numbers,
mhm,
need to know if your KPI has a certain value, why that KPI has that certain value,
yeah,
what what story drove that KPI up, or what story drove that pushed that KPI down, for
mhm,
that matter, right? Um, so the story behind that number is kind of more important than the number itself. I'm not discounting the fact that the numbers are
mhm,
not
mhm,
important. Numbers
mhm,
are important. We are a data analytics company after all, right? So the numbers are important, but the numbers can convey uh, to a very limited extent.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, Beyond that, you need to know the story of why that number is what it is.
yeah,
So that's one of the fundamental problems that we try to solve. And getting the story right from that number is a job done by AI.
Mhm.
You have AI models, you have built or we have built those AI models which essentially are curated for retail and CPG, or I would say consumer markets, which generates a curated and a crafted story that say for example a category manager or a store manager
Mhm.
or a
Mhm.
CXO for that matter um, intra tries to understand, because the story for a given KPI is looked at different perspectives from a different role. So, for
Agreed.
example,
Agreed.
a KPI is looked by a category manager or a store manager versus a CXO. Everyone needs a different perspective, and that's where storytelling comes into picture. Because the story that you're presenting to a CXO will be very different than a story that you're presenting to a category manager or a store manager who's working on ground.
Yeah. Agreed.
Their stories are much more tactical versus the CXO stories will be much more strategic, and that's what AI modeling is now redefining the whole data analytics space.
Mhm.
It's these minute distinctions in who the report is being viewed, in what context it is being viewed, um, is making it much and more possible and easy for these numbers to tell the story.
That's so good. That's
So
so good.
that's first fundamental problem, and then the second fundamental problem is, yes, you have the story, right, but everything, the story is driven by the data behind it. And especially in retail, right, retail is an industry which generates tons and tons of petabytes of
Mhm.
data, probably on a weekly basis. And it's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing in a way that you have that data now to back your AI models against, or to back your storytelling against.
Mhm.
But
Mhm. Mhm.
the bad thing is that you are now drowning into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have now more and more data redundancy problems. You have more and more data silo problems.
Mhm.
You have data digitization issues, because now um, every department in the company is holding a piece of information which essentially is not integrated with each other.
Mhm.
And now, in this heavily siloed data world, uh, if you're trying to build a story on top of it, you're getting a dysfunctional or a disjunct story, which essentially is not what anyone wants. And that's the other fundamental problem, where what we call the Nexlytix blueprint is, where now we have those connectors in your various data sources, which tries to connect it to your source, and then take it further to
Yeah.
build your dashboards or build your reports, or even take it further and build your story.
Yeah. There's so many aspects of the value chain that you've mentioned that a lot of people are, I think they're taking for granted. It's interesting, years and years ago I did a short stint outside of retail as a business developer, right? And part of my job was to go into companies. It was a project management company, and my job was to go into different business disciplines and talk about our ability to provide project management capabilities. Whether it was this is so old, I'm dating myself. These SharePoint sites, right? Like those are old school. That's an old school term. And but one of the things I learned very very quickly was very similar to what you're talking about, was around storytelling. Was that the CEO needs to be told a different story around their problem. The mid-level manager needs to be told a different story. The frontline individual who's actually going to be executing upon a lot of these different things are being told need to be told a different story. And it's interesting, but when this comes out, our study is going to be released. And what we found is when it comes to AI, we'll talk a little bit more in depth about AI, is that there's this tendency within retail. We have what we call the crawl and walk, and run, right, models, right. Everybody understands that sort of analogy, where the people who are actually sort of executing on these things or need to execute on them, they're still in the walk and sort of crawl phase, right. The frontliner individuals, but the companies are in this massive massive run phase. And I think they're running, but I don't think they're running, but they're running without with the ability to tell the correct story. And I often feel, to your point around data, I often feel sometimes companies will hide behind the data sort of as a justification to go in a certain direction. Now, I'm not going to let you talk bad about the industry. That's my job. So you're gonna, you can say, yeah. So what Steve said, right? Steve said, it seems like seems like everybody's like hiding behind the data. But what you're talking about is like, hey, I need you as a company to come from behind the data and actually be able to take this data and tell a story appropriately. More so, not just for the people on the outside looking in, but from an internal standpoint. I think that's the other issue that sort of problem that you're solving, is that it's not so much what the external people are saying from the outside looking in. It's really from an internal standpoint, the story that you need to tell, and then allow the data to direct you. Does that make sense?
That's absolutely true, actually, right? And one thing I always feel, and this typically happens in retail, is when uh, leadership thinks about integrating any sort of AI into retail, they always think from an external perspective
Hmm.
that um, okay, how my end consumer is gonna interact with AI, or is it only for the end consumer? It is, right? I mean,
Yeah.
after all, that's the
Right.
eventual
Right.
goal. You're trying to their life much more easier and simpler to make that particular purchase. So it is that, but often what a lot of people miss out is the fact that there is a lot of internal processes,
Mm,
internal data that also can be, I would say, streamlined with your AI models. And
mm,
this is not only pertaining to data, but also pertaining to the processes that happen in retail. They are quite complex, actually, right? That can also be solved through a lot of these AI automations in place.
yeah. So before the actual input though of AI, right? I almost feel like companies miss a step, and they miss a step in the categorization of the actual data, and then they just sort of push it into the AI, and then whatever the output is, the output. Are you helping solve that problem, right? Because I believe that's one of the fundamental problems around, even before we even get to AI. It's the categorization of what you currently have in a very digestible, highly functional, manner of data.
That's true, exactly, right. And I give you an example of one of the customers that we are talking to, and they're trying to integrate uh, a customer bot, an AI-driven customer bot, and what they were facing an issue is that when they were trying to get data points for a particular customer, they
Mm,
had to go through 17 different data sources to get that, and then feed into the AI bot or the model that they are working on. Imagine this scenario, right? This
mm,
is one company, 17. Uh, you might have another company dealing with 25 different data sources, and these will increase. It's not like,
yeah,
and this is
yeah,
a problem
yeah.
that is not, I don't think so this is a problem that is solvable.
Mm,
These will keep increasing because you will have more and more tools coming out for retail. You will have more and more systems that will be generated for retail. Retail is heavily driven on a lot of legacy systems that are
correct.
going there, that are going on for years. We are not seeing an end for those systems anytime soon. So the data sources will be increasing, the data silos will be increasing, the redundancy will be increasing, and that's why the need for having a common source of truth,
Mm,
or I would say a common cataloged source of truth, which essentially will now act as your uh, go-to data source
mhm, mhm,
uh,
mhm,
for all your AI models to work on.
mhm,
And that's where, when I talked about the connectors earlier, that Nexlytics, which are the blueprint that Nexlytics has, is essentially the fundamental layer of that blueprint is to connect to these data sources and come up with a common catalog source of data.
mhm,
And now take that common catalog source of data to the next level, whether it is reporting, whether it is insights, whether it is storytelling,
mhm.
or even for that matter, whether it is for your AI modeling.
Mm, that's so good. That's so good. Um, I was just looking over my notes, and you may have answered this one, but you and I, we had a conversation a while back, and you mentioned the idea around uh, AI readiness, right, for a company, right, and right, that could be a slippery slope, right? That can mean a lot of different things. But when you can you define it from a Nextlytics
Right.
standpoint?
Right. So AI readiness, right? And this is something that I was talking about, right? From a leadership level, at least in retail and CPG, um, all the execs and the leaders are trying to look at integrating AI into their
Hmm.
systems,
Hmm.
whether it is external or internal that we spoke about. The problem um, is that company even ready to be integrating
Mm,
these AI
yeah.
models? And when I say, is that company even ready? It involves a lot of factors, right? One factor is, do you have a single source of truth?
Hmm.
Because now you have bought a AI bot, and then you're feeding in 16 different data sources. Yes, AI is capable to handle those data sources, but uh, is it optimal in doing that? No, because of the fact that you don't have it cataloged in a proper way so that your AI model understands it, so your math models understand it. So that's one. The
Mm,
second factor is also, which is quite important, is having proper access controls.
mm, mhm,
um,
mhm, mhm.
and just I'll give you one example, right? Say a Microsoft Copilot, and you as a company, you got a license for Copilot,
Right.
and now you're trying to include multiple data sources to it, so that your exec or even your staff, for that matter, can go ahead and access data at their fingertips. Now, this is where access controls or proper set of access controls in place becomes more and more critical.
Mm,
Data at your fingertips is again a double-edged sword.
yeah,
At one
yeah.
on one side, you have literally data that you can query based on an English sentence that you can ask, right? Uh, and on the other side, you don't want that data getting exposed to a certain set of people that you don't
Yeah,
intend to have.
yeah, so good.
So, so that's one. The third one is, um, do you have proper profiling in place? Do you have proper data cleanup strategies in place? Uh, just having a single source of data does not to solve your problem. What if you have redundancy in the data? What if there are a lot of anomalies in data, which AI itself can solve,
Mhm, mhm,
to be
mhm.
honest. It's not something of a rocket science nowadays to kind of find anomalies in the data set and try to filter it out or try to clean them. AI models are built in a way, or there are a lot of AI models which are built to kind of figure out those AI anomalies and then clean up that data. So do you have these set practices in place uh, to make sure that you are actually AI ready
Mhm,
even before
mhm.
you start purchasing these AI driven tools, AI models to start integrating into your systems, whether it is external or internal?
Yeah.
And that's where actually Nexlytics has come up with the AI readiness calculator,
Mhm,
which
mhm.
essentially asks you sort of 10 to 15 different questions, and then based on that, it comes out with a score that, okay, you are 90% AI ready, you are 80%, or even you're 50% AI ready, for that matter.
Excellent, excellent. And those who are listening or even watching this, so there's going to be a link for you to go and try out that calculator. So make sure you do this right after you finish listening to this episode. I love what you said around the right person, or excuse me, the wrong person looking at at the data. Right, I
Right.
it was, you put it out there, but I was like, "That's so good," that I think we we tend to, even in organizations, we tend to have too many people looking at people, too many people who don't need to look at the data, looking at the data, having an influence on the data, and interpreting the data in a completely wrong way based off of their lens, right? Um, how can you help an organization make sure that they sort of safeguard that process? Because I've seen it happen, so many times. You have the wrong people at the wrong table, and they have a different perspective, and the company wants to go this direction, and then someone else comes in and they have a different perspective. But how are you helping companies sort of solve for that?
You're listening to Retail Leadership with Steve Worthy.
In my opinion, right, data democratization needs to happen.
Mm,
Uh, I feel it's a good thing. Um, I have noticed a lot of companies when I talk about silos, right? It's a multifaceted problem. One is the technical side of it, which essentially I would say, uh, for the lack of better word, can't be solved because
mm,
those silos will be, uh, and it will go on increasing as we move ahead. Um, and the other problem of, or the other facet of data silos is the fact that you have those organizational data silos that exist
yeah,
where
yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of uh, I wouldn't say departments, but a lot of teams try to silo the data and not expose it externally for multiple reasons. I wouldn't say for political reasons, but for multiple reasons. And that's where I believe, when you have the right set of policies, and when I say policies, I mean control policies
Mhm,
in
mhm.
place, and the right set of integrations in place, or the right set of APIs in place, so that access to data is easier but also controlled,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that
yeah.
given your uh, token for that matter, or given your access, you only get a set of piece of data that you should be able to see.
That's good.
That's one. The second one is, I would say, from what perspective you're looking at the data. And that I believe, and this, when it comes to storytelling, right? Yes, I mean, Nexlytix is built on top of it, right? I mean, it's one of the fundamental problems that we are trying to solve. Um, when it comes to storytelling, uh, and in the context of who's looking at the dashboard, storytelling becomes more important, because now that piece of a sentence that is shown to that person who's looking at the dashboard
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
will drive that person to think in that direction.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so that essentially, I believe, is that additional nudge that you're giving to that person to think into that direction,
That's good.
uh, which essentially will avoid the problem that you're trying to convey.
That's so good. That is so good. 2 more questions, I'm gonna get you out of here. If you had to describe your ICP, Nexlytics ICP, talk a little bit about that for those who are listening, and may want to get in contact with you. Who's your ICP?
Right. So our ICP is, again, right, starting with retail and CPG. So that's where our core expertise lie, and that's
Hmm.
where our top level industry focus has been for the past year. Now, beyond that, if I want to talk about what are the kind of companies that we
Hmm.
want to work with, so we're trying to work with the mid segment at this point of time, because we feel that in the whole AI adoption strategy, um, that particular segment is kind of a bit behind,
Mm,
as opposed to the large scale segment, where they're fairly, I would say, far into the game, as opposed to the mid segment. Um, and we certainly feel that they should not lose the race, and
yeah.
that's where our focus should be.
No, I like that. I was um chatting with a company out of Germany who's doing some things about moving into the retail space, and part of their grandiose idea was to like work with the Targets and the Walmarts of the world. I said, listen to me. I said that's not a good strategy. It's not. It's a great one, like down the line. but there's a level, a category of retail of within the retail organization or within the retail industry that's ideal for what they're offering, and also for you've already identified it for yourself, right? They want to play big, right? This segment that you're talking about, they want to play big, but they may not have the capacity, right? Or even some of the bandwidth to handle it. But you can actually provide a solution for them that actually allows them to play big within such a massive industry that we have here within the retail space. Let's talk roadmap a little bit. No, sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Just to add a bit, right? And that's absolutely right. And when it comes to solving it, right, you don't have to really boil the ocean all at
No,
once.
no.
It's not that way. It always starts with the smaller things that you put into piece, fit into the puzzle, and then you go on and build on top of it. So it's not like we come in and we say that okay, revamp the whole thing. That's not how it works. We take step by step. We take a data source at a time, build out an insight out of it, or build out the story out of it, and then we take it from there. Trying to boil the whole ocean all at once is probably a wrong path, and most of the times, 99 out of 100 times, you'll probably fail.
You, it's interesting. I wonder how many, and you probably just think about this from an anecdotal standpoint. I wonder how many companies that you've worked with or you're going to be working with who who will go into this with one story that they've already sort of created around who they are, where they want to go, and all these grandiose ideas. We just literally just spoke a little bit about this from an entrepreneurial standpoint, right? Where we think we want to go this way. And even the larger size companies, 500 million to $10 billion, right? They go into this idea around who they think they are, but then when you guys get in there and you start talking about the data, and the data tells a completely different story. Like, it's just I always feel like I always be a fly on the wall when they come to that realization of, like, you know what? Not so much that we've been doing things wrong, right? But we just may have to pause a little bit and maybe go in a different direction, or change up the narrative, that we need to tell ourselves, because we've been telling ourselves we're this, but now the data is telling us that we're something just slightly different. What are your thoughts on that? I just
And I believe it comes full circle to the storytelling aspect that we were talking about, right?
Yeah.
Because those stories are able to detect those undercurrents, or the undercurrent points in your data which you're not able to see, or I would say which you're not ready to see for that matter. Uh,
Oh,
so
that's so
um,
good.
and it needs to be told, right? For us as well, right? If you talk to me, if we spoke at NRF a few months back, uh, probably the blueprint idea was not there, but now we have that blueprint idea, because we have seen, as and when we are speaking with this with our customers and with our prospect customers, we have kind of felt that um, probably starting small makes much more sense, because a lot of these companies are still skeptical in integrating this. So
Mm,
that's an undercurrent we saw in our data, actually, which forced us to kind of pivot. And I'm pretty sure that happens with retail as well, because there are a lot of undercurrents which are not seen in those dashboards.
yeah. Oh my gosh. And you just said something else too. You've been dropping some amazing nuggets here, but around individuals, or just around companies not being ready, right? Not being ready to handle the story that is actually being told. That's so good. Let's talk roadmap. Um, what's on what without giving away too much, right? And having to have to send me over an NDA, like, before this goes out. Right? Give us a little bit of the next, 6. It's so funny. I was talking to someone a while back. It wasn't my coach, but it was another guy I sort of considered sort of a mentor. And we were talking about, you remember when long term was 5 years, right? It's like, you would be strategizing, for long term is like 5 years, short terms like, 2 and 3 years. Like, no, not so much nowadays. So, talk a little bit about your roadmap and what's what can
Right.
we
I would
expect?
say got it. I would say from a roadmap perspective, right? Again, I can break it down into two fundamental aspects. One is from a business point of view. I would say we would at least 2025, right? Nowadays, long term is 5 months. I'll be
Yeah,
very honest with you,
yeah.
not just 5 years. Um, so I would say for 2025, we would still like to stick with the mid market segment
Mhm.
from a business point of view, because that's where we feel the need is there, and that's where we feel we fit in perfectly well when it comes to integrating our blueprints into their system. That's one. From a technical point of view, one thing we did not talk about much, which also is one of the important aspects of data, is prescriptive AI or recommendations that
Mm,
for that matter. um, so you have the story, you have the fact, you have the story behind those facts. Now, what should you do with it? That nudge that you get from a story, is that enough, or you need a bigger nudge to take that decision? So we are there and not there yet. So our dashboards have started integrating a lot of prescriptive AI into the blueprints, but I would say probably a couple of months down the line as well, we would get more and more solid into having much more better prescriptions um, that aid the executive looking at the dashboard to make that decision.
yeah, that's so good. When you think about that, it's going to require a different leader, though, like different leadership mindset, right? Because here you have somebody now who is not just going off the data. They are thinking strategically, and they're sort of looking at a crystal ball based on the data and what the story's telling them. And now they actually have to make a decision based off of that. And so they really make it sort of a prediction around where they go. Um, a lot of leaders aren't really equipped, to do that because they take the data and they just sort of go off of that, and then sometimes they may blame the data if one direction doesn't go the way that they had anticipated. If you had to provide this is I said I was going to be this was going to be the last question a while ago, but I can't help it. If you had to give leaders like one thing that they need to think about when it comes to not just the prescriptive AI that you're talking about, but like their leadership capabilities now and maybe into the next 5, 10, 12 months, what would that be?
So, to your other point, right, about leaders not being ready to take this info or take these prescriptions, see, when the ultimate decision has to be taken by a human. There's no denying that fact.
100%.
Uh, uh, if you're relying purely on an AI model and then blaming the AI model, saying that, okay, the model told me to take this decision, that won't work. Um, so the ultimate decision has to be taken by a human. What prescriptive AI will do is it will give you a complete holistic view so that you don't miss out any data points while you're making that decision.
Ah, that's so good.
That's one. And the second thing is, right, when it comes to prescriptive AI, right, it is not only from an executive or a leadership perspective that you're looking at. Think of a dashboard where, say, a store operations manager who's actually a frontline manager
Mhm,
is
mhm.
looking at a dashboard, and you're giving them some bit of prescriptions as to what they can do to make their store operations better, based on the data and the story. That also is quite important, in my opinion, for the whole operations, for the whole retail operation. So it's multifaceted, right? You have those high level execs, uh, the prescriptions provided to them, again contextual, and then you have those tactical store operation or the frontline executives. and the prescriptions given out to them. Quite different, but strong in my opinion. Again, underlying the fact that the eventual decision has to be taken by a human, no matter
Yeah.
what.
Yeah. The decision has to be taken by a human. Please listen to that. Make sure you listen to that. Don't blame the AI. Um, don't blame the AI. Don't do it. Don't do it. I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast, and thank you for your partnership with everything that we do and with Worthy Retail and our whole ecosystem, and the being a sponsor for the report, our master classes, and of course this podcast, and looking forward to our partnership, not just now but definitely in the future, and excited for everything that you're doing. I got to tell you, this episode could have probably gone a lot longer because there were so many different things that nuggets that you were dropping in here that I'm gonna have a hard time getting some clips, meaning that I'm going to probably, this whole thing is a clip. This whole podcast is a clip. You did an amazing job. And anyway, I just want to thank you so much for being a part of this podcast.
Thanks for having me. And it's great, right? That's what the link is for, that you'll drop in the chat.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Excellent. All right. We'll talk in a little bit.